Hello. Hey there. How are you? It's Jennifer Palmer, and you're listening to the Welly Walk podcast. So thank you for joining me today. It's been 3 months since my last confession. Since my last episode, I've been on a break. Much needed, but not because I needed a break from you guys. It wasn't you, it was me. I needed to take the time and all of my attention and all of my energy and bundle it up into this ball and take it to a project, a big project that I've been working on. And I'll tell you more about it in the episode. But yes, it's been big, and it's kind of a step in a much bigger picture, which we're going to also be talking about over this next season. So for those of you who are new to this podcast, welcome. Thank you for coming. And you might be here because this episode is going to be all about the magic of movement and movement as medicine, this whole idea. So listen to this episode, absolutely. But you also might want to also go back to the very first episode of the podcast, The Catalyst, and start from there. This is a journey. This has been such a journey, but the most amazing journey of my life. And I've learned so much, and that's why this podcast is here, because there are so many things I was just so astounded that I didn't know. And I was like, do you know about this? Do you know about this? Do you guys all know about this? This is amazing stuff. And it's helped me to grow and to realize so much, to walk in the right direction, to becoming the person that I want to become, that I want to be. So anyway, that's the podcast. Here we are, though, again. How have you been? 3 months. Yeah, it's been full on. It's been busy. I've been building this project. It is so hot today. We are experiencing a heat wave here in the UK. Record-breaking temperatures the last couple of days. Hottest June temperatures on record. And oh my God, yes, this country is not equipped to deal with it. It's kind of like when you're in LA and it rains and everyone freaks out and the roads get all slippery because they've built up all this oil and they're slick, and you see all these people having accidents. Or the UK, if it snows, equally, everything gets shut down. There's no one out gridding the roads like they are in Maine. They don't know what to do with themselves. If we even get a little bit of snow on our lane, we are stuck. We can't get out because it just gets so icy because the temperature is always hovering around freezing. Anyway, so it's like that when it's hot here. The roads are actually melting. I couldn't believe it. I had heard this as a rumor last time it got really hot. This time I went and I was driving to go collect my kids, and the road was coming up in chunks and was literally melting and gooey, and I could feel it. You could hear it in the tires. Oh, also, a little update. We have a new car. I know, if you've listened to the last couple episodes, especially the last episode about the jealousy map. The last episode was a Vision of the Future, part 2, how we heal from trauma. And it was all about jealousy and identity and your destiny, and how jealousy, we can use it to inform us and to grow from. And one of the things you might know is that I was jealous of when we'd come back from a school holiday, somebody would inevitably have a new car. They'd show up at school with a new car. And yes, we've had this old beat up car for 14 years, and I loved it. It's seen us through a lot. It was our first car that we bought here in the UK when we had no money, and I was pregnant with my first child. And it has rolly windows and a CD player. And it did have an auxiliary cable, thank goodness. That was very useful. But it finally just died, and it became no longer economically viable to fix the car. And so we've ended up with a new car, and it's electric. We got an electric car. It's not as big as we needed, but it was a choice between, do we get an SUV that's not electric and is probably old with lots of miles, or do we get an electric car that's good for the environment, that's light on our pocketbook, with less miles, that's more reliable? We went for the reliable car, and I have to say, I love it. I love driving it. It's a Kia. It is, compared to my old car, anything would be amazing, but this is fantastic. I love it. And the air conditioning the last couple days, thank God, it even has ventilated seats. That's been a treat. So anyways, that's the exciting thing in my life, but I had to spend a lot of time researching and trying to come up with a solution, and selling our old car on eBay. That was an adventure as well. But here I am. I'm back. Thank you for joining me again. This is going to be episode 1 of a new season, season 2 of the podcast. And we are going to be continuing where we left off. We talked about Dr. K and his roadmap for how we navigate a midlife / quarter life / third life crisis and how not to repeat it. And there are steps involved that we're supposed to do in a certain order. And then the next episode about A Vision of the Future Part 2, how we heal from trauma, was all about how trauma can hold you back from navigating a midlife crisis. And it might be at the very heart of it. And you might skip over some steps that are actually you having to deal with your trauma. So we talk about that and identity. And this episode, though, is going to be a little bit of a catch up, but also I want to share with you this project that I've been doing for the last 2 months. It's been huge for me and a huge learning curve for me on so many levels. But basically, it's also, this episode is going to be about the magic of movement and how that ties in also with what Dr. K talks about often. He talks about, Dr. Alok Kanoja, we've talked about a lot, about how the mind and the body are a circuit. And this is what I've always believed. And this is what we believe in Pilates and so many other movement modalities like yoga and Tai Chi would agree. Your brain and your body are intrinsically linked and they're the same thing. And Dr. K says science is catching up with us, improving this. You can treat the mind through moving the body and treating the body in certain ways. And you can treat the body through the mind, understanding certain things and also regulating your mind, your nervous system, your emotions affects your body. It's a two-way street. And what I've always found in Pilates, I've been teaching for 13 years, but I've been practicing Pilates and I've been learning from Pilates for 27 years. And the thing that I found the first time that I discovered Pilates was magic. There was something transcendental about practicing Pilates. When I first met Pilates, I was in the darkest part, probably the darkest chapter of my life, which was university, which is supposed to be, this was the kicker, it's supposed to be like the happiest days of your life, right? Everyone's like, these are the happiest years of your lives, embrace it, enjoy it. And that just always stung. That was like a little knife in my side whenever I would think about that phrase and how you see all these movies and everyone's being crazy in their late teens and early 20s in university and doing all these pranks and going on road trips and whatnot. But I was in deep depression. I had so much anxiety. I was struggling with an eating disorder that I couldn't kick, that was always evolving and morphing into some other form. I could never get rid of it. And I had no self-esteem. And I was looking down the barrel of graduating from university and not having a clue what to do with my life. And knowing what I really wanted to do, but not allowing myself to become that person because I was so ashamed of myself and I was so judgmental of myself. And what I really wanted to be doing was pursuing the arts and becoming some kind of creative. And I loved dance. I knew I didn't want to become a professional dancer, but I loved dance. And I've always found it as an outlet. When I was a little kid, I used to dance around the house, endlessly interpretive dancing to music. And it was so freeing and I just, no judgment. I loved it. And when I got to university, it was the first time that I had access to dance classes. So I would make sure to take a dance class every semester. But I always felt on the outskirts. I always felt like I was on the fringe of the dance department. And there are all these amazing hardcore dancers who had been doing dance since they were children and were fantastic. But I was kind of dabbling and keeping a toe in and keeping near to these people, hoping they would rub off on me, basically. And Julia Cameron talks about this in The Artist's Way. She talks about how often we find ourselves finding jobs or staying close to people who are doing the thing that we really want to be doing. We sit adjacent to them and we live through their experiences, but we don't commit and we don't do it ourselves because we're scared, because we're fearful, because we're judging ourselves, because the little gremlins on our back, the sensor is telling us that we're imposters. And that's what I was doing with taking these classes as well. I was a shadow dancer. But one day in the dance department, a post was put up on the billboard and it had a picture of this thing what I thought was a machine, which I then learned is not a machine. You do not call it a machine. Joe Pilates would rap you on the knuckles if you did. It's an apparatus. A machine moves you. You move this, and it's an apparatus. And it was the reformer, a picture of a reformer, which, yes, looks like an S&M dungeon, something or other. Everyone makes that joke when they come into my studio. But it was made of metal and wood and leather straps. And it was this amazing thing. And there was all the dancers were tittering about Pilates, and they're going to learn Pilates. And the school had bought this reformer, and they'd put it somewhere mysteriously up in some attic in the dance department. And there were classes being offered. And I thought, oh, I would love to do that. I was so curious. And it seemed like this thing that all the dancers wanted to do, and I wanted to do it too. And then the universe delivered. My housemate, who was in the dance department, Noelle, who was a bona fide dancer, gorgeous dancer, came to me and asked me if I would be her guinea pig as she trains to become a Pilates teacher. And I was also a little bit jealous of this. I was jealous that she was becoming a Pilates teacher. So interesting, note to self. And I, of course, was like, yes, this is a gift. This is a gift. Free lessons when I'm a poor, starving student who can't afford lessons. And so we met in the attic of the dance department with this machine. Nope, this apparatus, the reformer. And first we learned the mat work. And I remember the first time she had me do rolling like a ball. And she was trying to describe and tell me what to do. And I was like, that's not going to work. That's impossible. You can't do that. And then she did it. She showed me. And I was aghast. I was like, I can't do that. You're a dancer. I can't. I don't know. But she got me to do it. And lo and behold, there was something happened. I wasn't that good at the first repetition, but then the next one, you just go and you keep going, you keep repeating, and every single time you do it, the body just fine-tunes the movement a little bit more, starts to organize itself naturally because it knows this is the picture, this is the thing you're trying to achieve. And I just kept repeating it and relying on the fundamental skills that she was teaching me of Pilates, breathing and scooping, and I was achieving it. It was working. I was rolling like a ball. If you don't know this exercise, you roll in the shape of a ball and you massage out your back and your spine, and you scoop your belly, you massage with this deep internal lift of your abdominals, and it feels glorious. And the thing that I found doing this, just meeting with her and learning Pilates, was that there was something else even better that was happening. My anxiety, my depression, that censor voice in my head would disappear. When I was doing Pilates with her, I was completely attentive and paying attention, and it was like the clouds were parting and the sun was coming out and my eyebrows were lifting, and I felt this lightness in my being and this feeling of being present and happy and contented and hopeful. And I did not feel this normally. This is something I did not feel at this time. I felt hopeless and despairing and in the dark, and the darkness was thick and all-consuming. That was where I was. And that's how I came to Pilates to begin with. And that's why I've stuck with Pilates ever since, because there is this magic that happens when you perform the exercises Joe Pilates gave us, and you are mindful and you are doing the fundamental skills that he gives you that should be performed in every single exercise. Something bigger happens. And that's part of the reason why I've wanted to make this course, because I want to give this knowledge to everybody. And part of why I named my Pilates studio Lightwell Pilates is that I want it to be a place almost like a library. And Joe Pilates' studio that he first set up in the 1940s is the classic picture of his studio, looks like a library. It has all these amazing pictures on the walls and Persian rugs, and everything's a little bit Victorian looking, like it's coming out of that time period, but it looks very studious. And then as Pilates evolved, it became a little bit more streamlined and mid-century and 60s, but it still has this intellectualness around it, married with this embodiedness. And somehow the sum of all of it is you get out of your mind, you get out of your way, you move, and there's a magical feeling of transcendental peace that comes with it. And all of my clients say this when they come. They're just beaming by the end. They're so much happier. They say they're happier. They say they're taller. They're relaxed. I had one client tell me she went to the doctor and she was actually taller. They measured her and she's grown taller, and she's in her 70s. And another client said that she's stopped snoring since she's been seeing me because of the work we've been doing on aligning her neck and her head and her shoulders and her posture. And there's all this stuff that comes along with it that's so special and so effective. And I wanted to provide that online in a way that reaches more people. That's also an education. It's not just a normal Pilates class that you just go and you check in and you do the motions and someone talks to you and barks orders at you, but you actually are learning the why behind the movements, the why, without squashing that magic. And that's the trick. How do I maintain the magic and give that to you, and also give you all the intellectual and the yummy, interesting kind of welly walk neuroscience and the biomechanics? And how can I keep it transcendental? How can I make this the case for my clients? I do not squash the magic of the method, because oftentimes people get a little bit too intellectual. They get a bit too analytical and they get into their way. And I learned a lot about why that's true in movement. So this is interesting, this first little thing that I'll tell you about. So basically, the brain is a predictive processing machine. It spends the majority of its time trying to predict what's going to happen next and be prepared for that thing. And the brain does that with movement. It anticipates what you need it to do. So if you need to walk up the stairs, your brain relays the message to the body that it has to organize itself so that it can walk up the stairs. And it will, because we've been practicing walking up the stairs since we were a toddler, right? When we are a baby, we explore movement and we learn how to move by experimenting, stabilizing and mobilizing simultaneously. These things just come together with us, and that's how we learn to move. And then the body's learning patterns of movements, and then it's anticipating and predicting, oh, we need to use this pattern of movement to accomplish this thing. And if you get intellectual about it, if you start analyzing how you walk upstairs, you are going to become much worse at walking upstairs than if you just let your brain do its job. It's a subconscious action of the brain. It's happening in the background. And it's because your motor cortex and your cerebellum and your vestibula and all these kind of sensory motor regions of your brain, this network, is organizing together, and it's organizing all these muscle groups across the entire body to orchestrate something, to walk upstairs. So in Pilates, we use visual imagery and we use visual cues. And when you do that, the body responds differently. The body responds in a natural, kind of instinctive manner. It organizes itself. So if I tell you to pour water out of your pelvis forward, you know what to do. You tip your pelvis forward and you imagine water pouring out of it, but your whole body, your legs around your hip joint, your pelvis, your low back, the front of your pelvis, and then your shoulders, your whole body is responding to this command, and it is figuring out how to stabilize and mobilize your body to pour water out of your pelvis forward. And if I ask you to lift your spine up like a string of pearls and stretch that string of pearls out taut up to the ceiling, you immediately lift your spine and lengthen it up into a straight, long line. You do it naturally and your whole body is organizing. I don't have to give you all of these little micro cues. As soon as you get anatomical, if I tell you to engage your glute or engage your serratus anterior, the brain stalls. It doesn't know what to do with it because that's not how it naturally operates. So this is one of the first things that I learned. I wanted to know, why do we use visualization? And the other thing about visualization that I learned was from Dr. Tara Swart, which is really interesting. If you just imagine moving, so if you're just lying on the ground and you imagine lifting your arm, but don't lift your arm, you are still triggering all the neural pathways that will be triggered when you actually lift your arm. So you were strengthening those pathways just by thinking about that movement. And they've done, I don't remember where I heard about this, but they did a study with people doing bunker shots in golf. And they had some people just practice in their mind and imagine doing this bunker shot in their mind over and over again. Then they had another group just practicing physically. And then they had another group who combined those two things. They imagined practicing, and then they actually practiced it. And then they had another group do nothing and then just try doing a bunker shot. So you can imagine what happened. The group that did no practicing was not as good and did not progress. But the interesting thing is that you'd think the same about the group that just imagined doing it, but no, they improved their bunker shot just by imagining doing it over and over again. And then the group that combined the two, that actually practiced it and imagined it, they had the best results. They saw the most bang for their buck. So if you just visualize something, and I'll do this in Pilates sometimes, and I remember when a Pilates teacher asked me to do this once, she said, just imagine you're lengthening your leg. And I was in a very precarious position trying to do a teaser. Just imagine you're lengthening your legs. And now do it. And it was magic because my legs just floated up into position. And my body did not brace and it didn't question what it was doing because it had already rehearsed it internally. The motor cortex had organized the body to perform this task. And this is how the brain works. If your brain is a task-oriented machine, so if you give it an idea, a shape, an image, a feeling, it will do everything in the background in microseconds to achieve that thing. So that's part of the magic of Pilates, but also just think about that when you're doing anything, when you're learning when you're running or you're cycling or you're learning archery or you're learning to paint, anything, your body is organizing itself and is learning to move. And when we do Pilates, we are just helping it to organize better by bringing a little of our mind to it and bringing the mind to the body and the body to the mind, and being a little bit more conscious about our alignment and our posture and strengthening our core muscles by using our scoop. But anyway, so that's one amazing thing. Another thing that I learned, so I was listening to a podcast with Robert Schleip, who is a German psychologist and human biologist and an author, and he's very big in the fascia connective tissue world. And this fascia is so fascinating. I'm not going to go on and on about it here, but we have the most nerve endings in our fascia, and this is related to chronic pain and to stiffness and to everything. Everything is fascia. That's how the world is thinking now. Instead of thinking about bones and muscles and ligaments and joints, we are now thinking about the connective tissue, that envelope that encases the body, that wraps it like a present. And it's all connected. You have to consider the whole thing, the context of movement. You have to consider the fascia. So I've been learning a lot about fascia, and he was talking about a study that was conducted about attention. And we've talked a lot about attention in this podcast. Dr. K says he thinks that 90% of the problem is often a lack of awareness. And if you just bring awareness, if you just start to bring your attention to something, you will change, which I totally agree with. And I learned a lot from Healthy Minds, which is that meditation app, which I love, that teaches the neuroscience behind meditation as well. And they talk about attention, and focus, and how this is what you're training when you're meditating. So Robert Schleip was talking about this study in attention, but it had to do with depression and anxiety. And this might relate back to me back in my 20s. And so the study was looking at people who are depressed or have anxiety. And they wanted to see if doing a certain type of movement exercise would help relieve anxiety and depression. And their hypothesis was it had to do with where your attention is going when you're exercising. So they have two groups. They have a foam rolling group. And if you've ever done foam rolling, you will know that it is hard. You have to balance on a foam roller in precarious positions. And then if you were if you are stretching yourself with a foam roller, you push yourself up against the foam roller in a way that stretches out your fascia. And it can be painful, but it feels so good and it feels like a release. And here's another thing about fascia that I'll just say very quickly. They did a study. Fascia gets tight when you become stressed. And stress causes inflammation in the fascia as well. And so they did this study on rats, because they always are, and they injected the rats with something that creates inflammation in the body. And then a couple days later, they encouraged half of the rats to stretch. I don't know how they did this with rats, but they did. And they saw that the biomarkers for inflammation reduced in that population of rats that were stretching. And it's because the fascia is holding this stress, this inflammation. And as you stretch, the inflammation was reducing. And also they think it's because the fascia is kind of a gel matrix, like a gel sponge that encases the whole body. And all this fluid and information and toxins are flowing through this spongy kind of substance, this gel matrix that the fascia is in. And as you stretch, you are squeezing out this fluid and you're getting it to flow, and you're bringing new fluid in, and you're hydrating your fascia through stretching and moving. So think about these rats. Anytime you're moving, anytime you're stretching, you're reducing inflammation in the body and you're reducing your stress. But going back to what Robert Schleip was saying, so they had this foam rolling experiment. They had two groups. They had one group that was going to do these foam rolling exercises where you're balancing on the foam roller and you are actively pushing yourself into it and massaging out your fascia, which is intense. It's hard. Your whole body has to be involved stabilizing. It's very active work. And then the other group was doing a sham foam rolling massage, which it's not sham like you clean your car with. That's what I first thought. I was like, sham foam rolling with a sham? Like you're cleaning your car? No, that's not what he meant. He meant like a fake foam rolling therapy. So it's not a real therapy, but the participants thought they were testing out a therapy. And basically they just had them resting their head on the foam roller. They'd lift their head and hold it, and then they would bring it back down and place it on the foam roller. And with various body parts do this. And the interesting thing they found when you're testing various therapies or drugs for depression and anxiety, this is what they do. They give you a list of words. I know this is interesting though. Follow me. They give you a list of words, and half of the words are positive words and half are negative words, kind of intermixed with each other. And they read you these words and they're asking you to remember the words. And then they do the thing that they're testing. So the foam roller people did their active foam rolling where they're stabilizing, they're paying attention, and they're pushing, and it's painful. And then they had the other sham foam rolling group just lifting their head and laying it back down, lifting their arm and laying it back down and doing this stuff. And the interesting thing is, if you read this list of words to someone who's depressed or anxious, and then you give them a little bit of time, and then you come back to them and you ask them to remember all the words they can, they will only remember the negative words. It is like there's a filter that happens. Like they're filtering out all the positives, and all they're taking away with them is the negative perspective. It's like they've got blue tinted glasses instead of rose tinted glasses. But if an intervention works, so you give them a drug that helps with anxiety, if they've been told the words before they've been given the drug, they get given the drug, and then afterwards they're asked to remember all the words that they can remember the positive words as well as the negative words. They can remember both. They can see life as it is. They're present. They don't have that filter of only seeing the negative angle. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that crazy? And guess what they found? They found that the people on the foam rollers who were actively foam rolling in a painful, stabilizing, active way, when they recited the words back, they could remember the positive words as well as the negative words. But the people who were doing the sham rolling practice, they could only remember the negative words. And is this about foam rolling? No, it's not just about foam rolling. It's about what is happening when they're foam rolling that has this effect on their anxiety. And Robert Schleip, his hypothesis, and they need to study this more in order to make sure that it's true scientifically, is that it's the attention. It's the fact that when you place your attention on something and you are focused, you can't go into the default mode network of the brain. And I've talked about the default mode network of the brain, but I will tell you again because it took me a long time to understand and kind of get grasp with it myself. So I first learned about the default mode network of the brain from Dr. Tara Swart. She talked about it in terms of creativity and where the mind goes when it's trying to come up with ideas. And it's a good place when you're doing that. It's a good place when you're trying to be creative. It's kind of like your daydreaming mind. It's where you go in your dream state. But it can also be a very negative place because it's also the place that we go when we're ruminating and when we have anxiety about the future, when we have that analytical voice in our head, that critic who's talking to us, that gremlin on our shoulder, whispering all the nasty things to us. We go into our default mode network and we're spiraling and we're circling around in it. And we're churning in it. And that's where people who have anxiety and depression live most. They live in the default mode network of the mind. And they discovered the default mode network. I learned this from the Healthy Minds app. They discovered it because when they were first studying the brain with MRIs, they would give them tasks to do, and they wanted to see what parts of the brain are lighting up when we ask them to do certain tasks. What part of the brain is in charge of this task? And they would see. And then in between the tasks, everyone's brain would go to the same place. They would go to these various regions of the brain. And the scientists discovered this is where our brain goes when we are offline, when we don't have to be doing something, when we are daydreaming, when we are mind wandering. Our brain goes to the default mode network. Thus, the default mode network. It's where your brain goes on default when it doesn't have to be doing something else. So that's how it got its name. But anyway, as I was saying, the default mode network is where people live when they have anxiety and depression. They are caught up in this rumination of the past and anxiety of the future. That's in the default mode network. When you have to bring your attention to something and you have to focus, when you have to be mindful, when you have to be present, it switches off the default mode network. And this is why doing meditation and doing mindfulness practices have been shown to be anxiolytic, meaning they reduce anxiety and they reduce depression because you are forced to be focused on the here and now, and you're not allowed to mind wander. You're not allowed to go off daydreaming. And it's the same when they were doing the foam rolling. They had to balance on this foam roller very precariously and do some very intense work that was painful, and they had to pay attention to the instructions and they couldn't mind wander. So they were not in the default mode network. But the people who just hung out doing the sham foam rolling, they could mind wander and they didn't really have to pay attention because they weren't really doing much of anything. So that's Robert Schleip's hypothesis there. But as soon as he said that, it was what I've always thought about Pilates. I've always felt that Pilates is this transcendental meditation practice. And this would be proof. Because when you do Pilates, you have to be so attentive and you have to pay explicit attention to your body. You have to be connected to your body and present with your body and feeling it and instructing it. And every exercise you do, not too quickly, not too slow, just right, rhythmically, and you only do a couple repetitions and then you're flowing to the next exercise and you do a couple repetitions and you flow to the next exercise, and your mind is never stopping. Your mind is always focused. And you flow through this and you breathe. And here's the other thing, the breathing part of it. So I learned also a lot about the vagus nerve and about polyvagal theory. So have you heard of this polyvagal theory? So the vagus nerve you might have heard of. It's this nerve, cranial nerve 10, I think it is, and it comes down from your brainstem and it wanders through the body. Vagus means wandering, and it wanders through the body, through past the heart, down into your stomach and your intestines, and it's feeding all of this information. It is the main pathway of your nervous system. It regulates your nervous system. And we've talked about the parasympathetic nervous system being your rest and digest and your rag doll. And we've talked about the sympathetic nervous system being your fight or flight and your Tony the tiger and fists up, and we're going to go into a brawl and we got this, and we've got lots of high energy. And I always thought when we do Pilates, we are regulating our nervous system in this way. There's this calm and this peace that comes with doing the exercises. And I wanted to know why that was. So I was looking into polyvagal theory. Polyvagal theory is a theory that was put forth, I think, in the 1990s by someone named Stephen Porges, who's an American psychologist, and he's a professor of psychiatry at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. But he came up with this polyvagal theory in the 1990s, and it basically proposes that there are 3 modes that the nervous system goes in, and you're always cycling through this. You're always cycling through them. The first is ventral, which is the mode when you feel present, when you feel okay, you feel grounded, and you feel open and curious and compassionate. That's your ventral. Doesn't that sound like a nice place to be? Yes, that would be the place I would like to be all the time. Thank you very much. You are calm and you're collected. The next is your sympathetic, which we've talked about, and it's your fight or flight. And it's slightly chaotic and jagged. And it's a very aroused and mobilizing state. And you have an increased heart rate. And, you want to act. You want to move. You feel agitated. And then we have the dorsal vagal state, which is kind of akin to the sympathetic state, but almost polar opposites. And it's when you feel shut down as a response. You feel immobilized, incapable of getting any energy, and collapsed and numb and disassociated. And these are both survival modes, survival mechanisms. Sympathetic and dorsal is when you're going into survival mode and you're trying to protect yourself, either by fighting or by shutting down or curling up into the fetal position and trying to conserve your energy instead of using it. So you're protecting yourself. I learned all this from Deb Dana, who wrote a book called Anchoring: How to Befriend Your Nervous System Using Polyvagal Theory, which is her book for popular consumption for all of us people who are not theorists, who are not scientists. And she's lovely to listen to. I highly recommend looking her up. And I found her on quite a few podcasts. I'll put one into the show notes as well, which I really liked. And she talks about how you can use this idea of these 3 modes to understand where you sit in your nervous system and how your nervous system is operating. And you will discover that your nervous system, often a lot of us are being dragged around by our nervous system, and we're kind of victims of our nervous system. But what she wants to propose is that the more aware, there it is, awareness again, the more aware you become of these 3 states, these polyvagal states, the more control you will have, the more regulation you will have over your nervous system. And the more you will be the operator of your nervous system. And the hope is that you can pull yourself more into the ventral mode of the nervous system, that calm, collected, that feeling of being okay. And you can be there more often. That becomes your home territory, as opposed to a lot of us live mostly in sympathetic, in the stressed out fight or flight, or in the dorsal, which is the collapsed and the wanting to disappear, wanting to retreat type of mode. A lot of us are in that. And she says when you're in those 2 modes, the sympathetic and the dorsal, you can't access compassion. You can't access openness and empathy for other people, which just makes me feel so anxious for the world in general, because most of us are in this state. When I think about politics, and I don't like to talk about politics on this podcast, but when I think about politics and how divided everyone is, and everyone's in this defensive position, and so much anxiety and so much sympathetic fight or flight energy, or dorsal collapsed, feeling negative and withdrawn and despairing energy out there. Anyway, I thought this was so interesting what she was talking about. And she was talking about things that we can do to help strengthen our connection to our nervous system, become more in control. And she talked about breath and moving as being 2 very important things that we can do for ourselves. And immediately I was like, Pilates, this is going to be Pilates. So basically breathing in Pilates, we breathe in a very specific way. We hold our belly in and up. We scoop our belly deeply in and up. And then we can't breathe into our stomach. We breathe instead into our rib cage. And we train our ribs to be able to swing out and pull in. And it's this deep diaphragmatic breath, but also pulling in and up with the belly and scooping the belly in this way that is decompressive. So you'd think the whole thing is bracing and compressive, but it's not. The opposite is true. It's this decompressive, stretching out, strengthening, and openness, this expansiveness that you're trying to achieve in your body whilst doing your Pilates exercises. That is at the heart of every single exercise. And she talks about how breathing is a function of the nervous system. Breathing is regulating your nervous system, and your nervous system regulates your breathing. And she talks about sighing and how the quality of your sighs throughout the day can kind of tell you a lot about what state of your nervous system you're in. So if you breathe out a sigh of contentment, you are in ventral. You are in this place of peace and okayness. And if you breathe out a sigh of frustration, you are in sympathetic. And if you breathe out a sigh of despair or despondency, you are in dorsal, right? And breathing regulates your heart as well, and your vagus nerve is regulating your heartbeat and communicating the messages of your heartbeat up to your brain. There's this big loop. So your breathing is a way to access and to manipulate your nervous system. And she talks about the long exhale breathing, which you might have heard of, the physiological sigh that Andrew Huberman talks about. You breathe in quickly, maybe for 2 inhales, and then you exhale a long exhale through your mouth like a little stream of air, and you try to make it the longest exhale you can. And then you breathe in quickly, maybe 2 sharp inhales, inhale, and then you exhale. And the person that I do yoga nidra with does this at the beginning of every single yoga nidra session. And what that does is it brings your nervous system into the ventral mode. It's a way of, and I learned that breath work when I was doing hypnobirthing, when I was going to give birth to my first child, and it did really help. And it was my first introduction to breath work and breathing and how you can control your nervous system through breathing. So we don't do that breath work, specifically that long exhale, so much in Pilates. But what we do is we purse our lips and we exhale. We inhale through the nose and we exhale through the mouth, this long stream of air through pursed lips. And she said, adding resistance to your exhale is another way of bringing yourself into ventral mode. So throughout all of Pilates, when you're doing an hour long of Pilates, you are breathing in this ventral mode regulation way. You're inhaling through your nose, you're exhaling through pursed lips, creating resistance on your exhale. And that is helping to regulate your nervous system. So, amazing. Also, deep diaphragmatic breathing, using your diaphragm vigorously is shown to regulate your nervous system. So I thought that was really interesting. On top of this, I've also learned, which we don't do so much in Pilates, but I think you'll find it interesting, that if you breathe in a pattern where you're taking 6 breaths in a minute, you slow down your breathing to 6 breaths in a minute with an inhale and an exhale, both being equal, that slows down your heart rate and makes you feel calmer. And they've found that a lot of religious chanting and also religious songs like Ave Maria are done with this kind of cadence, the same cadence that makes you take 6 breaths every minute. So people have naturally been doing this since time immemorial. They could feel it intuitively that if I breathe in this way or I sing in this pattern, that it calms me down. So think about that next time you're singing Ave Maria or chanting, doing some Gregorian chants. Also, what they found that when people slow down to 3 breaths per minute, their brain waves, their theta and their delta brain waves, will synchronize in this way of deep relaxation. And people enter the state, which they call a state of being rather than thinking. And I think you can only know if you're in that state when you are in it. But it's kind of that same mindfulness place, the place that I have felt myself going as I've been doing meditation and learning meditation, is that you get to this place of just being. You're just here. and you're not thinking about it. You are just there, and it's weird and it's interesting, and there's something really spiritual about it. And this has been my first kind of idea of, oh, I am spiritual, and I understand what spirituality is. It's a state of being instead of thinking. And in Pilates, we do this, I have to say, because if you are one with the exercises and you are one with the body and you are not overthinking it, you're not getting into your way. Like I said before, we can't analyze and think logically about the movements of the body. We have to allow the body to move intuitively and to absorb the work that we're doing in the practice, and it just starts to organize itself. When you are doing this in Pilates and you flow through it, you enter a state of being, and you are not thinking too much. You are just allowing yourself to be there with your body. Anyway, so the other thing about movement that Deb Dana says, so think about this too in dancing, think about this in doing yoga or Tai Chi or any movement that you're doing. She says movement is a great way to regulate your nervous system because certain types of movement are related to certain modes, to the different modes. And she says the ventral movements, the movements that increase that sense of being in ventral and keep you there, are movements that are cyclical and rhythmic. And think about that when we dance. You know, there are certain dances that you feel okay and you feel open and you feel flowy, and they're moving rhythmically and they're moving with a circular movement. And also in Pilates, that's what we do in Pilates. Every movement has this feeling of rhythm to it. It's all coordinated with your breath, this rhythm of every single exercise. And every single exercise, there is a circular feeling in it that coincides with your breath. So again, that's another way that we are using movement in Pilates to regulate our nervous system and to bring us to this place of feeling calm and safe. But then she said you can also experiment with music. Music and dance is a great way to experiment with the other modes. So you can experiment with being in dorsal and experiment with being in sympathetic, but have control over it because different rhythms will be associated with those. So you can think of sympathetic as like a chaotic. And she said music is a great way to do this. So if you listen to music like, I think of Firestarter, that song, or any kind of thrashing heavy metal, that's a way for you to be in sympathetic, but you have control of it and you are exploring it and experimenting with it, but it's not taking you away with it. And same with dorsal. I think of Radiohead, the band, which I love. I think of a lot of music that I listened to in the noughties and a lot like Midlake. There's a lot of music that was quite lethargic and pained and you know what I mean, this sad, sorrowful feeling tone running through the music, and we luxuriate in it, we love it, and it moves us, it moves our heartstrings, doesn't it? And you feel in line with it, you feel this sorrow, and it's somehow cathartic and wonderful. So we're playing around with being in the dorsal, that sorrowful, despairing place. We can practice being there, but we don't have to stay there, and we can have control of it. And I thought this was all so interesting. And she says that as you become more regulated in your nervous system, you will find that your home territory might be sympathetic. Your home territory might be dorsal. And we want our home territory to be in ventral. But as you become aware of this, you'll start seeing glimmers of that ventral place throughout the day. And that's what I felt back then when I did Pilates, when I did rolling like a ball with Noelle in the attic of the dance department. And there was this glimmer of peace, this glimmer of okayness. And that's why I kept on following Pilates. And it's a great way that you too can start to notice these glimmers of okayness in your life and start to notice your nervous system shifting. And the more aware of it, maybe you can hold on to those okayness moments, and maybe you can practice being there a little bit more. And she says the more regulated we are, the more we are in ventral, then it becomes a public service to show up and to be in the world and to interact with other people's nervous systems, because we will help to regulate them. We will help to bring this positive energy and this okayness and this openness and this curiosity to the world. And it's a public service to be doing so, which is something that I've thought a lot about. And we've talked about how Dr. Tara Swart says that, it's contagious. Your stress is contagious, but also your happiness is contagious and your positive mindfulness is contagious. And all of this comes into the idea of abundant thinking versus lack thinking that we talked about with Dr. Swart, and survival mode that she talks about, and that we've talked about with Dr. K as well. This ventral energy is you being an abundant thinker, you being in this place of abundance, whereas being in the sympathetic or the dorsal is you being in lack thinking, and we want to move away from that and try to be more in this abundant thinking. So we can help ourselves by moving. Movement is medicine. Movement is magic. And this is why I love Pilates, but also why I think whether you're doing whatever movement practice you're doing, start applying these things that I've been talking about in this episode. Just start paying attention and see how they apply. How if you become too logical about your movements, you get in your own way and your movements become stifled and less efficient. That's the other thing they found. If you're too logical, your body starts bracing and starts trying to control, and then it becomes uncoordinated. It becomes less efficient. And also those movements, you don't learn them. You have a harder time learning the exercises, learning the movements. Whereas if you get out of your own headspace and you let your body organize itself and you think in terms of visualization and imagery and let your body coordinate itself, the movements will come. They will be more coordinated, more efficient, and you will learn them faster. So remember that. Remember that if you're bringing your attention to something, you are taking yourself out of the default mode network, and you are going to release yourself from depression and anxiety, and it's anxiolytic to do any of these mindfulness practices. And I realize that meditation is hard for some people. A lot of people coming to a place of stillness is really hard. So maybe movement is a way in, and maybe it's not a big movement. Maybe it's walking. Maybe it's just stretching. But you being present with it, not just putting ear pods in your ear, earbuds, whatever they are, in your ear and listening to something and distracting yourself from your body, but maybe instead being present with your body while you're exercising, you will get more benefit. You will get that out of your head, out of the default mode network benefit of the attention. And think about this polyvagal theory and start to notice glimmers in your day when you are okay, when you feel the sense of being present, and start to notice when you're not there. Notice when you have jagged, chaotic energy, you're in the sympathetic, fight or flight. Notice when you're in dorsal and you feel despondent and heavy and like you want to just curl up in a ball. Notice these things. Just start noticing them. Don't do anything about it, but start noticing. And your behavior will start to change. You will start to shift just by being aware and paying attention. All right, guys, I'm going to leave you with that. Come back for the next episode. It's going to be a continuation from where we left off. We're going to be going more into the idea of manifestation now. We talked about midlife crises. We talked about how to heal our trauma. And now we're going to start building a vision of the future using Dr. Tara Swart's neuroscience of manifestation, and also talking about some other key players that have helped me to deal with my toxic relationship to money and how to figure out how to be in this world, this capitalist world, and be happy. And yes, come with me on this journey. I will see you next episode. And if you are interested in my Pilates course, you can find it at lightwellpilates.com. Under Strength You Can Trust. And there's a taster video there. And basically, it's open to sign up for now, and it will be up and running. I'll be releasing the first week of it next Tuesday. And then it's going to every single week for 8 weeks. I'm going to release another week. And then after that, it's just there. It's just up and the whole thing is available. Join at any time in the next 8 weeks and you get the founding cohort price and you get access to me through WhatsApp. And perhaps if there's enough interest, we'll have a live Zoom And it will be an opportunity for you to ask all your questions, and I can give you modifications as you need them. I want this to be an education, but also a movement practice that you can use to help regulate your nervous system and find the magic of it, the transcendental quality of Pilates. That all said, thanks for joining me today. Also, what you could do for me that would be so amazing would be to follow the podcast on Apple or Spotify. I know it's confusing to figure out how to why do they make it so confusing? But I think on Apple there's 3 dots at the top, and you can hit those dots and you can press follow this show. Also, if you could leave me a review, I'd really appreciate it. It would be lovely. And if you want, send me some comments, communicate to me. I'm here to talk. And please share this with anybody you think could benefit from the podcast, from anything that we've talked about. Oh, and also, I have a special coupon for anyone who wants to join the course this summer. Use Welly15 and you can get 15% off whatever price is available at the time of the course. I'll have that up forever. And if you've listened to this podcast, there's your little reward for learning about movement magic. And I'd love to leave you with something that I've been listening to a lot in our new car, which is so exciting. It's got Bluetooth connectivity. I mean, science. Technology is so advanced these days. And we've been listening to Spotify in the car, which has been such a treat. And I've come across this song, which I'm a bit obsessed with. I love the song. It's my earworm at the moment, so I apologize if it becomes your earworm too, but look it up. I usually leave you with the words of Jung or some other philosopher, such as my son Asa. But today I'm going to leave you with these prescient words from the song Stressed Out by 21 Pilots and their album Blurry Face. All right, here it goes. My name's Blurry Face, and I care what you think. My name's Blurry Face, and I care what you think. Wish we could turn back time to the good old days when our mamas sang us to sleep, but now we're stressed out. Wish we could turn back time to the good old days when our mamas sang us to sleep, but now we're stressed out. We're stressed out. Yeah, deep, I told you. So go away and maybe look up that song. But I feel like it relates a lot to what we talked about today about regulating our nervous system and being stressed out. And mamas singing to us regulates us, connecting to our mamas. So, yes, I hope you get a chance to move, experiment with movement. Just see what it does when you infuse that little bit of movement, magic, medicine into your day. And yeah, I'll see you for the next episode. May the Welly be with you, and may movement be with you as well. Bye-bye.